Welcome, Red Eyes members. Thank you very much for stopping by. It's great to have you with us. We are, of course, continuing our very interesting conversation with John Anthony West about Egypt and also the modern world of what it is that we're seeing unfolding, as it were, in the world right now. And we're going to talk more about the ancient Egyptians, of course, about their teachings and their science, and see what that can do to help us in the situation we're in today here. But before we go there, John, I'd just like to ask you if you think that the current system that we are in, if that have to collapse or crash or crumble in any other way for this new era, new time to begin, basically. What do you think?
Yes, it absolutely must crash. It can't. There is no getting back to normal, and since normal is a lunatic asylum, nobody in their right mind, if there are any such people, would even want to go back to it. The problem, of course, is in what way, if at all possible, can the damage be minimized? And this is another matter altogether. There are steps that individuals can take, but a lot of people are going to be hurting out of this thing. I mean, globally, this is a disaster. And people, even if they'd like to buy more of the rubbish that they've been buying in Walmart all of these years, don't have the money to do it, and they don't have jobs. And the jobs, if you follow this stuff, no day goes by when there's not some other giant company laying off 10 or 15 or 50,000 workers. You got 50,000 workers laid off. You've got 50,000 people who are making livings no longer having livings. This is a disaster. And you listen. Again, as I said, if you follow this stuff, the people who didn't see it coming, the ones that Obama brought in to solve the situation, are now telling us what to do and when it's going to be over. They haven't a clue when it's going to be over. If they had a clue, they wouldn't have made it happen in the first place. And it's not as though there weren't any warnings that, everybody thought this was the wise thing to do. Lots of people didn't think it was the wise thing to do, me included. Yeah. But who listened to us? So now the debacle is upon us, and exactly the manner in which it unfolds and rolls out. Absolutely nobody really knows. Just all you can say is that for sure it is not going to be pretty. And as I said, we're forecasting that there really are going to be revolutions here and there, but out of it, at some point or another, maybe people will start coming to their senses, and this is where Egypt comes in again, because Egypt stands as a model, not as an exact model. In other words, we're not going to build pyramids again and temples of Luxor and mummify our pharaohs, but the principles, the doctrine of immortality that Egypt is based upon, and that in rather corrupted form trickles down into Christianity, and is mirrored also in somewhat not really corrupted form, but by the religions of the East, and Buddhism and Hinduism and Zen and all of those Eastern doctrines, is basically the same doctrine. And this is what we're here for, individually and collectively. And if a bunch of us don't try to put these ideas into operation, and that doesn't mean just reading about them and thinking about them. It means it's a certain kind of discipline. And it can be had in various plates. You have to be careful, because a lot of it is just blabber and talk. But if we don't do that, we're cooked. And I mean that individually and collectively. And one of the advantages, you might say, if you call it advantage, maybe that's the wrong word, but one of the possibilities inherent in this collapse is that it will force people to start asking questions that they have not been asking before. Not all of people, no. A lot of them will go down with the Titanic, but a lot of people, and again, this is I like working with analogies, and as far as I'm concerned, there are really only three ways to learn lessons. Two practical ways. The first way is the hard way. And that is, let's say you want to be a professional baseball player or a concert class violinist. So you make that decision, and every ounce of your energy goes into perfecting, into mastering those, one a sport and the other an art. And that's the hard way. It's a tremendous amount of work, but there's a joy to it. The second way is the harder way. That's if you're a drug addict or an alcoholic and you deny that there's a problem until you're absolutely in the gutter at death's door. And then you're confronted with just one choice. Are you going to give up the drug or the alcohol and live, or are you going to keep drinking, deny that you've got a problem, and die? That's the harder way.
Yeah.
That's Western civilization. It is a drug addict. It is an alcoholic, and it is now on its back in the gutter at death's door. And it's an individual as well as a collective thing to say, well, I don't want to do this. I really don't want to die. And then there's the third way, which is the grace of God, which I actually believe in, but I don't count on it.
Okay, yeah.
So to learn lessons.
John, do you think that there is I don't know if we should call it then God or nature or some kind of overarching consciousness here that is in some way involved in human development and that at this point is saying, no, this is not the way to go down. What I'm referring to is there some kind of, judge here, referee here, who's saying this is not the way to go about it? Or why are things kind of crumbling? Is this a psychological issue going on here? What do you think?
Well, it's crumbling because it's time for it to crumble, to go back to that yuga cycle. Is there anybody overseeing winter? When winter hits, everything dies and goes underground, and the seeds sprout under, and gradually in March or April or so, it'll warm up and things will start sprouting again. But winter is winter. And where we are now, we are at some point indefinable. I don't know. We're in the middle, let's say the equivalent of the middle of January, or maybe we're somewhere in February. There are certain hopeful signs, you might say. One of the things, actually the only hopeful sign that I can see for myself, major hopeful sign, is that, that's complicated, but if you go back, you might say that the low point for Western civilization, less so in the East, but even there was there was a downfall of the Roman Empire in the Dark Ages, which were really pretty dark, 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th centuries BC in Europe. And the Western world were pretty bad. Actually, Islam not so bad. Once Islam took hold, it was the beacon of civilization in the 9th and 10th centuries, especially in Spain and Baghdad and places like that.
Yes.
But how shall I say, where we are, so it's been coming out of that low point from, let's say, 900 or so AD. And what we've seen in the last couple of hundred years is, of course, this astounding but mindless and, for the most part, destructive technology. But that, the genesis of that has been this tremendous flowering of creativity. Unfortunately, most of it directed toward destructive means, weapons of mass destruction, and biochem warfare and GM, genetically modified plants. I mean, all of this horrors, the Frankenfoods, the stuff that we're beset with. But that creativity itself is, at least in theory, neutral. If all of that energy were suddenly, or at least a lot of that energy was suddenly turned toward things that are genuinely soul-nourishing and heart-warming, things could change in a hurry, quickly. Yeah. There's a marvelous line quoted all over the place. I don't know, you probably know it, but Victor Hugo's line that there's one thing stronger than all the armies in the world, and that is an idea whose time has come.
Right, yes.
You know that line?
Yeah.
Well, a couple of sort of thoughts about that line. Good Victorian that he was, Hugo, basically, reading into it, it sort of assumed that the new idea whose time has come is a good idea, but it could just as well be a bad idea. I mean, Hitler is a bad idea, and yet his time came. Yeah. And the second thing is that the second strongest thing in the world is an idea whose time has not yet gone. So this is when we find all of these blowhards who now have cabinet positions again talking about returning to normal being the lunatic asylum.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, always the throwback, if you will, to all of this could potentially be that this gives, just as the first, not the first, obviously, but the last Great Depression in the 30s had, of course, that gave way to some new form of dictator which come in with certainty and again kind of instills that into people that yes, we will bring the old order back, and now things will be structured again, never more we're going to come into this. So there is a danger as well as a potential here at the same time. That's what I'm seeing.
There is a very real danger, you bet there is. And, I mean, yes, you go back into history. I mean, Hitler was not an accident. I mean, the whole thing was set up by the British and the French to make sure that the Germans stayed impoverished. And along came Hitler, and let's face it, half of corporate America was all on Hitler's side because the alternative to them, socialism, my goodness, they'll take away our money. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a very, very real danger. But at the same time, the possibility of a renaissance actually is there, but it depends. I keep repeating this, individually and collectively. And to go back to the question that you asked before, is there, let's say, an overriding consciousness that looks after us? I don't know. What there isn't is somebody with a big gray beard pointing a finger and saying, now everybody's going to be enlightened. I mean, there's a whole new age stuff going on out there. I get this across my website. Mm-hmm. I get all of this information as well. Who think that suddenly the clock will strike 2012 and we'll all be brothers again.
Yeah, right.
And I don't believe anything of that sort for for 2 seconds. But when the climate changes, I mean, just as it's very difficult. And you have to go to a lot of effort to grow roses in January. But in June, it's easy. So when the times change, I mean, I really do believe that the Hindus before them, in the Vedas, knew what they were talking about with their yuga cycle, that there is this slowly turning cycle, and that when it's winter, and when spring comes, the possibilities that were not there, even just a few weeks earlier, all of a sudden there are those possibilities.
Yes.
And the plant, actually somewhere on my website there's a little essay on civilization and comparing it to a park. And when the park gets degenerate, I mean, let's say that the Western, the great religions are the trees in that park, and when the park keepers are supposed to be the priests and the poets and the scientists and the philosophers. But if they're all drunk or crazy, the park falls into disarray and everything becomes poison ivy and brambles, and the seeds sprout, but they can be trampled into the ground by any wandering jackass. And so it's a situation with a lot of potential, but it doesn't just happen automatically. Somebody's got to tend the seeds, and somebody's got to make them grow, and somebody's got to keep the wandering jackasses off from the land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, in other words, there's a higher consciousness. I mean, with the entire fabric of the universe is nothing but consciousness, and this is the sacred science. And the Egyptians understood it very well, and so do